What's happening, everyone? You're listening to the Wildcast on Apple and Spotify. You're also watching this podcast on Tucson.com. We appreciate all of our video listeners. And for our podcast listeners, if you haven't yet, make sure you subscribe, rate, and comment on Apple and Spotify. I'm Justin Spears here with Michael Lev. We're going to be talking a lot of Arizona football in our podcast. Lots to discuss. Schedule, National Signing Day, Arizona adding a boatload of players. And I do mean a boatload. We're talking about over 50 newcomer players for Arizona. And those are just the scholarship guys. So we have plenty to discuss for the next X amount of minutes. Lev, let's first start off with the Arizona football schedule. So the Big 12 announced the dates and the matchups for Arizona football for the 2025 season. Season opener, August 30th against Hawaii. We already knew that. But the schedule for Arizona in conference play is pretty interesting, Lev. And I want to get your thoughts on the 2025 schedule. So if you look at the first half, in the first 6 games, 5 of them are home games, which I'm like, that seems to be pretty favorable for Arizona. Now, we don't know how these Big 12 teams are going to look. Like it could very well end up being a gauntlet for the Arizona Wildcats, but man, I like all 3 non-conference games at home. They start Big 12 play at Iowa State, and that's coming off a bye week. And you have some interesting home matchups against Oklahoma State. I love this matchup, or I love this schedule. What are your thoughts on Arizona's 2025 football schedule?
I think that it is favorable in a handful of ways. We knew, how many home games they would have overall. They just so happened to play all 3 of their non-conference games at Arizona Stadium this year. We did not know how it would break down. The fact that that 5 of the first 6 are at home gives them a chance to get off to a good start.
Yep.
Which they did last year too, and then fell off. But I think in this, it's a different set of expectations this year. There's a lot of newness to the team in terms of systems and the roster. That would help in terms of confidence, cohesiveness, all of those things. I like how the bye weeks break for them quite a bit.
Yeah.
Their first bye week, and there's 2 again this year because of the way the calendar breaks. I think having 2 bye weeks is a great thing overall, and is good for the kids, good for the sport, the health of the players, our mental health, all of those things. But the first one comes right, before the start of Big 12 play. So you play your 3 non-conference games, natural break, then you're right into the Big 12. Then their second one comes like almost right in the middle of Big 12 play. They play 4 games, get a week off, and then they finish with 5. So I think those things set up really well for them. And when I look at this schedule overall, Justin, I know that they face several of the top teams from last year, right? The top 4 finishers from last season are all on this schedule: Arizona State, Iowa State, BYU, and Colorado. But when I look at it overall, it's not like, oh my God, they're going 2-10. Like,
Yeah.
I can see a path for them to maybe go 6-6.
Yeah.
From this schedule. Okay. You figure they're going to win the first 2 games. Shouldn't assume anything, but you figure they're going to beat Hawaii and Weber State. And then Kansas State comes here. Obviously, it didn't go well against Kansas State last year, but Kansas State's was kind of weirdly up and down toward the end of the season. And they will be playing their 4th game in as many weeks. So they open in week 0 against Iowa State in Ireland. And the week before they play Arizona, they play Army, which is always a tough matchup against those service academies. So,
and if I'm not mistaken, Kansas State, did they lose quite a bit of players to the portal?
I don't have that right in front of me.
Yeah.
They do bring Avery Johnson back, who's a very talented quarterback, great runner, killed Arizona with his legs last year. Hopefully, schematically, they've got something in store for him that's a little better than what they did a year ago. They lose DJ Giddens, who is obviously a big weapon for them out of the backfield. A lot of really good running backs in the Big 12 who are going to be selected in day 2 and day 3 of the NFL draft coming up. But I don't know. It's not like an unwinnable game. Then you have a week off And then at Iowa State, I think will be tough. Iowa State brings a lot back, road game, etc. Then home for two. Oklahoma State, which was terrible last year. They've never
Winless.
been that bad under Mike Gundy. So you kind of don't know what you're going to get, but that's a winnable game. And then BYU comes here. They were very good a year ago, but different playing in Tucson versus playing in Provo. So like I said, I think a chance to get off to a really good start and a chance to maybe get to 6-6. We have no idea at this point, like what the team is going to look like. It's all speculation. I'm sure that the Vegas over under will be less than 6. It'll probably be 4.5 or something like that. But when I look at the schedule, I feel like it's doable.
And the teams that you mentioned that were top 4 finishers in the Big 12, these are teams that are also kind of rebuilding. Like, well, ASU, they returned a lot of players. They're going to be the favorites to win the conference, even though they lose Scattaboo. They returned Sam Levitt. They returned a bunch of players, and they did pretty solid in the portal. I'd say they'd be close to the top.
BYU will be in that conversation for sure.
Yeah,
I think. But like to your point, like Colorado,
they're losing firepower.
They are losing a lot. Like a lot. Now they are kind of they are a reload type of program. The way that Dion's doing it, I mean, they are not like the slow build kind of thing. They go for big time guys in the portal. But when you lose Shedeur Sanders, who's probably going to be a top 10 pick, Travis Hunter, who's going to be a top 3 pick, probably.
Yeah.
You lose LeJontay Wester. You lose Will Shepherd. I mean, that's a lot of weaponry, right? Like they're not going to be as good as they were last year.
Yeah. Would
be my point. So again, like a game to me that's winnable. Like I look at I guess you'd call it the middle 7. We talk all the time about the middle 8 in football. I look at the middle 7 games of the Big 12 slate. Oklahoma State, BYU, at Houston, at Colorado, Kansas, at Cincinnati, and Baylor before finishing against Arizona State. If they could win 4 out of those 7, that to me is the path to 6-6 in bowl eligibility, which would represent a step forward for the program, and I think would be a good sign for Brent Brennan's long-term future here.
And I think the 5 home games in the first half of the schedule, it allows them to get some cushion when they really get into the meat of their Big 12 schedule. Because Hawaii, Weber State, I feel very confident that Arizona is going to win both of those games. And then Saturday versus Kansas State, I think, I mean, we don't know how Kansas State is going to look, but I think that's a winnable game for Arizona. And then at Iowa State, that's going to be very tough. But fortunately for Arizona, they got to go to Ames, Iowa in September, not November when it's freezing cold. So weather is going to be just right. You never know what happens in Big 12 play. You know, that could be a game that Arizona pulls off an upset. And then Oklahoma State, I feel very confident about that game too. So I just feel like the first half of the schedule really sets up Arizona nicely to where, you know, they can afford to, you know, drop a couple games and still vie for a bowl spot in postseason. So,
yeah, I think, look, there were some very good teams that emerged last season in the Big 12
that we didn't expect,
right? That we didn't expect a lot of them. But and I said this last year, and obviously Arizona didn't hold up its end of the bargain. But like when you look at this league, there aren't like a ton of teams where you're like, they're unbeatable, right? Like they're a dynasty. There's no there's no Ohio State,
Georgia.
There's no Georgia in this league. It's a deep league. Like I think Houston, for example, is going to be a lot better than they were because they've addressed their quarterback situation, which was a huge problem. I think the rest of that team was actually pretty solid. They got a real quarterback coming in from the portal now. That'll make a huge difference. Cincinnati's on the schedule this year. They kind of slumped at the end of last year. That's a program that's kind of in crisis. I think Scott Satterfield is kind of on the hot seat there. Kansas coming in here. Like they're good. Lance Leipold has done an amazing job with that team, but like they're not like Texas.
No.
They're not Oklahoma. And to win those games, you hope that you're much more competitive than you were a year ago. You got to do a lot of the little things right and well, and they didn't do a lot of those little things well last year. Things like winning the turnover battle, special teams, short yardage conversions, red zone. A lot of those details. Like Brent Brennan talked a lot about, like, hey, we need to hammer the details. They didn't do a good job of getting that message across and executing those things. And that's what you're going to need to do in this league, which there's going to be a lot of games that are one-score games that come down to the end. And it's the teams that make fewer mistakes and execute in situations that win. Like, that's what the Kansas City Chiefs do so well.
Yep.
Like those situations that come up, the make or break plays at the end of the game, they always seem to do the right things in those spots.
And people call it luck, but I also look at it as, no, that's a team with championship pedigree that knows how to perform in those moments. Do they get some luck from the officials? Maybe, but that's what comes when you're the best team in the NFL, right? But we're not trying to diminish the Chiefs. They, no doubt, when it comes down to winning time, they always figure out a way to execute. And
yeah,
we'll
also I'm not in any way, shape, or form comparing Arizona football to the Kansas City Chiefs.
Hell
either.
no.
Long way to go to even be at the level of the Kansas Jayhawks or Kansas State Wildcats, let alone the Kansas City Chiefs. But I don't know. It's this time of year we're always feeling, optimistic, right? There's a lot of change. I think we'd feel less optimistic if they just kind of stuck with the status quo.
Yeah.
And they sure have not.
They really shook things up, both personnel wise and coaching staff wise. I think, man, every single step of the way in this offseason, Arizona has won. And, I felt bad for Brent last year because he had the lofty expectations. Sorry, guys. I'm part of placing those expectations on Arizona because, of course, they have the star power. But the depth behind those stars wasn't really there. And when injuries started to pile up, Arizona really found themselves in trouble and became problematic, so problematic that they went 4-8 when we were talking about Arizona, maybe even going to the CFP. So last year,
ASU had the season that we thought Arizona could have.
Exactly, which is crazy, but that's exactly what happened. But I also felt bad for Brent because I started to think about like the last year and all the different injuries, all the different things that happened every step of the way, and also the timing of his hire. The guys that were coming to Arizona through the portal and also the high school recruiting class, like a good chunk of those guys decided to jump ship and enter the portal and either go to Washington or go somewhere else. And there were also a handful of guys who decided to enter the portal too. And so after missing that first portal window, Brent and his staff, they had to Brent had to first hire a staff, and then he had to quickly assemble a team for the 2024 season. And now that I feel like he has had a full cycle where he's been able to coach these guys, and the guys who opted to return, they know this staff. They know their philosophy. They know how they are. They're very comfortable with this staff. So they decided to stay. And then you went and signed a bunch of guys in the 2025 recruiting class, which we're going to talk about here in a little bit. You did a great job in the portal. And I feel like this is now Brent Brennan's team. And he can actually really coach up these guys in the spring. When last year, when he was first hired, he was like, okay, how do I keep the band together? How do I keep these guys together? And how do I keep them happy? And I felt like this staff kind of like held back coaching these guys, because how are you going to piss off a guy like Tacario Davis when he's got 1 foot in, 1 foot out? You piss him off in spring ball and he's like, all right, see ya. I'm going to the portal and I'm going to Washington. So I felt like this staff in 2024, they were more careful. And now I'm seeing a lot more commitment for Arizona football. And I feel like it's really Brent Brennan's team.
Like we read into a lot of things as media members, kind of what we do. We're always trying to, read between the lines, whatever cliche you want to use, but read the tea leaves. But correct me if I'm wrong. Tell me I'm crazy. Hasn't Brent Brennan had sort of a different like air about him in some of these postseason, off-season media gatherings than he did during the season? Like he seems more
Fiery.
organized, a little more sure of himself. Like it just feels like there's more of a plan in place overall. Whereas last year it was just like you're hopping on to the ride like when after it's already going, like you're just like plopped
You're,
into the
you're,
roller coaster when it's up at the top and about
yeah.
to, and you haven't even put your safety belt on, right? Like it was, look, and people get on our case because they feel like we make excuses for the current regime and so forth. Look, we will take full blame for kind of overinflating expectations last year, as you alluded to. But it is difficult to take over a program in mid to late January. Like after the first portal window is basically done. Like look how many players they acquired in those 6 weeks, like between the early December and mid January. Okay. Like most of the portal class, right?
Yeah.
Which is, it's got an okay ranking. Now imagine like all those guys are gone and you're coming in and starting like 2 weeks ago.
Yeah.
Think about that. That's a very difficult situation. And you're, like you said, you're trying to make everybody happy. You don't want everybody to leave. Like he was so hyper focused on retention, like keeping these star players here. And he did a good job of keeping them. He made a mistake when it came to the offensive coordinator position, and what that ended up looking like. And it's going to be a completely different offense this year. I love the direction that they're going with Seth Dagey. I had a chance to talk to him a little bit after the press conference yesterday. And I was mostly asking about just kind of assembling the quarterback room. But then I asked about my favorite stat, just in time to throw, TTT. And he was explaining how, like, in this system, the idea, if it works right, is that the drops are synced up with the routes. So if it's a 3-step drop or a 5-step drop, when that back foot of Noah Fafita or whoever hits the ground, that's when the ball's supposed to come out. And if the system works, if they're able to get guys open and, Noah is seeing things clearly, I think there will be much more snappiness to the offense this year, which will be good to see and helpful. And I thought it was also super interesting that he said we're gonna run Noah at times, even though he's an undersized guy. And they ran the quarterback a lot at Marshall. I thought that was fascinating. Obviously, you don't want to get your quarterback hurt, but a lot of people say that it's when you're standing in the pocket that you're most vulnerable to injury. And Noah, he seems like he does a pretty good job he knows how to protect himself.
Yeah.
For the most part, that one, that touchdown run he had against, was it West Virginia? I think it was West Virginia when he like plowed over a couple dudes.
Oh yeah.
At the goal line. That's the exception for him. He usually knows to get down or get out of bounds. So I like a little bit of quarterback run in the offense too. Obviously, it's going to be a big learning curve for everyone on that side of the ball, but they're all learning it together. And that's what, that's what spring ball's for. And it's good. You got a veteran coming back in Noah Fafita, who's kind of, who'll be the on-field liaison for everyone. So I don't know. I'm excited to see what the product looks like.
Which it's a really good segue because we asked Brent Brennan about rebuilding the roster and plugging in the holes. And, he said, everyone always says the quarterback is the most important position in football. And there is some truth to that. Now, fortunately for Arizona, they already got one of those guys in Noah Fafita. So what's next in line? Offensive and defensive line. And my goodness, Arizona added a ton of offensive linemen and defensive linemen, literally a ton and more. Like we're talking about, was it like nearly 6,800 pounds added to the offense and defensive line for Arizona? Like the amount of weight and big bodies they added, it's absolutely insane. We're talking about 22 guys and all that weight. And Brent Brennan said something that I found very interesting. He said, you got to be able to run the football and you got to be able to stop the run. And I'm kicking myself because I didn't really mention this in my National Signing Day story. But if you look back at the 2023 team, everyone always talks about Jacob Cowing and McLaughlin, T-Mac, like all the stars, right? And they were the superstars of the team. But really, like the foundation of Arizona football in 2023 was the offensive and defensive line. Like if you look at the O-line with Jordan Morgan, Jonas Avinea, Josh Baker, Raymond Polito, Leif Magnuson, Wendell Moy. And then you look at the defensive line with Bill Norton, Upshaw, all those other solid defensive linemen that they had. They were really good at stopping the run. They had one of the top rushing defenses in the Pac-12. And they were also really effective running the ball with Jonah Coleman and Michael Wiley and all those other guys. So when you compare it to 2024, two categories that Arizona was very bad at, along with some other categories, but they were second to last in rushing offense. And I think they had the third worst rushing defense in the Big 12. And of course, that's a big reason why they went 4-8. They got flat out bullied at the line of scrimmage. And Brent Brennan felt like Arizona didn't have the size to match up with some of the other Big 12 teams. I actually had him on the radio show earlier today, and he was talking about like just coming out of the locker room and going on the field for warmups. You could just look across the field and just see how much bigger the other guys' offensive defensive linemen were in comparison to Arizona. So getting that size and creating the competition. So should there be a situation where Arizona is dealing with offensive linemen being hurt? Like I knew they had 7 different starting offensive lines last year, but Josh Oglesby, the offensive line coach, told me that they had 11 different offensive linemen see the field last year. That is not continuity. There's no just consistency with the offensive line. And so they dealt with a number of issues up front. And adding the competition and adding the depth, especially guys with big bodies, improving the line, improving the trenches, I thought that was a very huge step for Arizona.
Everybody remembers the Territorial Cup. We always remember the Territorial Cups. They got absolutely bullied and manhandled in that game.
Yeah.
I mean, it was a joke how much more physical ASU was than Arizona. And if you're Brent Brennan, like you can't have that moving forward, right? Or you're going to be out of a job. So they had to address the lines. By my count, they have added 10 players who are listed at 300 pounds or more, and another 6 players who are listed at 280 pounds or more. Now, look, just because they're big doesn't necessarily mean that they're good or that they're in shape. So there's still a lot to be determined about whether this is going to work. But you have to throw resources at the problem, right? And they've thrown a lot of resources at this particular problem. And most of the 8 of the 10, or only 2 of the 10 300-pounders are true freshmen. That's Sione Tohi and Peter Longi, who are going to be coming in here as newbies. The one like super smart thing that Kevin Sumlin ever said when he was here was like the closer to the ball you go, the more experience you want to have. That's why they went and got some junior college offensive and defensive linemen.
Yep.
Right during his tenure, who actually performed okay here. Guys like Josh Donovan, to name one.
Trayvon Mason, right?
On the offensive line, Trayvon Mason, I think, was a junior college player. PJ Johnson,
yeah,
I'm pretty sure was a JUCO transfer. So the closer to the ball, the more experience you want to have. That's a place where maybe you go into the portal or you go into the junior college ranks and bring in some older, more physically mature dudes. That is what they have done on both sides of the ball. And they've also, added, I think there were 6 true freshman offensive linemen now, with Longi joining the group. So you've got this like next wave. I'm going to be doing a piece later this week, just kind of on this idea of whether you can build for today and build for the future at the same time. And when you look at a lot of these portal acquisitions, a lot of them are going to be one and dones. the guys who have only one more year of eligibility. So you can convey that message to the younger players. Hey, bide your time. There's going to be a bunch of openings next year. Show us what you got. Kick ass in practice, and maybe you'll be starting by the time 2026 rolls around. But yeah, they did what they had to do as far as line play. They had to get bigger, had to get stronger, had to get tougher in the trenches. As you mentioned, that's where it all begins and ends.
Yep.
Truly does. I mean, one of the biggest strengths of the 2023 team was their ability to stop the run. Like, they were a very good run defense for most of the season. And when you can do that, then you can force opponents into must-pass situations, second and third and long. No team is comfortable facing those kind of downs and distances. Then you can blitz, or what's coming. You can put in your dollar package, or however they're going to do it up front. Maybe they'll put a bunch of defensive ends up there. The advantage swings to the defense when you can do that.
Third and long situations against that 2023 secondary that Arizona had, with a rising Takario Davis, Ephesians Prysock was great, a healthy Stooks, Dalton Johnson, Gunnar Maldonado, Genesis Smith as a true freshman, he was pretty solid. So it was the perfect complementary defense for the Wildcats, and they're trying to return to that. But man, I'm looking at some of the sizes of those guys that you mentioned, Lev, and they also added a junior college defensive lineman, Zach Siulepa, 6'7", 365 pounds. So Arizona, they're not messing around when it comes to the size. Because last year, did they only have two 300-pounders on the defensive line? It was Chuba Ma'ai and Isaiah Johnson, and that was it, right? And those guys were hurt.
You are correct.
So
yes, they were light on the defensive line, to be sure. And I mean, just the reality of modern football, like, you got to have big dudes on the D line.
Yeah,
it's not the be all end all. Again, it doesn't guarantee that they're good players, but it's a good starting point. I'd rather have big dudes who you have to get into shape, more so than like smaller dudes who have to eat like 10,000 calories a day just to be big enough, to be Division I caliber linemen.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, like I said, they went about it the right way. I think adding Joe Salavea as the defensive line coach even like accelerated that process even more. Like, they've added several players since he's been here. He's only been here for a few weeks. The Polynesian pipeline is flowing like back in the day. With Joe, and Brent Brennan has a lot of connections to that community as well. And yeah, it's on paper, it looks good. We'll see what it looks like when they start spring ball, and we have a spring ball schedule now.
Yeah,
that came out today. They open on March 18th, adding a little bit to the March Madness, and the spring showcase event will be on April 19th. So just about 1 month's worth of spring football coming up here soon.
And a few practices are open to the public. So for any of you Arizona football fans that are interested and you want to take time out of your March Madness viewing schedule and go watch the Wildcats, the open dates for that.
I got it. It's March 22nd, March 29th, April 12th, and April 15th. And
April 5th?
I'm sorry, April 19th. Sorry.
No, April 5th is the open practice. April 19th. 5th. That's the spring game. Yes.
Yeah, sorry. March 22nd, March 29th, April 5th, April 12th, April 19th. Those are all just the Saturdays, right? And those are all at Arizona Stadium. And they are very clearly marked on the calendar. There was kind of it was kind of unclear what was open and what wasn't during training camp this past fall. Something that a lot of us pointed out and kind of rubbed some people the wrong way. Their communication is better on that front this year. Saturday practices in the stadium, you can go and watch those.
So we addressed the size of the guys that Arizona added. let's address the speed, because Arizona added quite a bit of skill players at the wide receiver and running back position. I mean, the pieces they added from junior college level, FCS level, it's like a potpourri of speed that they added. And Brent Brennan gave you some gold, Lev, when you asked him about that. He was like, if you don't have speed, you're chasing it, which I thought was a brilliant line. And he felt like Arizona's speed, especially at wide receiver, was really lacking. And they went out and got a handful of players. I'm excited to see what that slot receiver position is going to look like with guys like Luke Wysong from New Mexico, Javen Watley, the guy they added from Chattanooga. I mean, he is really, really fast from the tape that I've watched. And then at running back, Ismail Mahdi, who was an All-American in 2023 at Texas State as a running back and returner. You're adding in Mike Mitchell, the transfer from Utah, who's a really solid player. I think he was highly touted coming out of high school, coming out of, I think he's from Orlando, or he's from Florida. And then you add in the high school running backs too. Well, I didn't even mention Quincy Craig from Portland State. But then the high school guys, Wesley Yarbrough from Houston was insanely productive at Crosby High School. And then I'm a big fan of this new guy that they added, Cornelius Warren III. They call him Corn, Lev, which I'm like, they got to get him some NIL deals with some corn companies or a popcorn brand. But Cornelius Warren III, this guy put up 217 yards in the 6A state championship game at Jerry's World. Runs track super fast. He's like 5'9". He is going to be what we thought Speedy Luke was going to be. And I think in Seth Daigie's offense, a guy like him is going to feast. I'm excited for the speed they added.
Yeah, it was interesting to hear Brent Brennan talk yesterday. We're recording this on Thursday. He spoke on Wednesday on at the afternoon of National Signing Day about track times, what they're seeing with GPS so far. I think they like players who have played other sports, something that they've talked about. Track is another sport. And obviously it's it's oftentimes translatable, right? Like if you got verified track time, you're going to be fast. And they needed more game breakers. Obviously Tetairoa McMillan was and is an incredible player. He could take the top off the defense. But that was not really his forte. I mean, he's going to use his big body. He's going to run crossing routes. He's going to win 50-50 balls on the sideline. He's going to make spectacular catches. Chris Hunter emerged over the second half of the season. But again, I wouldn't call Chris Hunter a burner necessarily. Now, look, the whole structure of the offense was kind of off last year as far as spacing and, running it at different levels and all of those things. But I know for a fact that Brent Brennan was frustrated that guys weren't able to get open more often, beyond that kind of those top couple of guys that they had. And the hope is that some of the new wide receivers will be able to do that. You're bringing in some good experience with the likes of Luke Wysong and Chris Hudson, guys who've played a lot.
Yep.
At a pretty high level. Trey Spivey is a bit of a project, but hey, 6'4", 217, from Arizona, that's someone you take a chance on. And then the young guys, Isaiah Mazzell and Gio Richardson, are both renowned for their speed and their big playability, right? So, again, on paper, it's good. They needed to, Brent Brennan wanted to change over the receiving core, and they did that. Running back, so much transition in that room over the last 2 years.
Yeah,
look at what they had like in the 23 season, how much they lost. They tried to replace it. They had this dude Ja'Cory Krosky-Merritt, who looked awesome in his first game, and then stuff happened, right? The eligibility questions that were never fully resolved. Yeah, I thought it was funny, Justin. His stats in the East-West Shrine game were almost the same as he had against New Mexico, like the carries and the yards.
Yeah.
They were virtually identical. He basically had about 200 total yards rushing between those two games. The last time we've seen him on the field, but they lost him. Suddenly their running back room got thin in a hurry. I don't think it's going to be thin this upcoming year. They're up to, I think, 6 running backs plus Caden Luke, the running back fullback, as far as scholarship guys. So they've really attacked those positions. And when you kind of put it all together, they've put a lot of resources into having the offense, to trying to make the offense better. And we've talked about this, if you're going to be bad or mediocre, it's better if you're bad and mediocre, but also exciting and scoring a lot. And they were not that last year.
Be competitive. Because, man, those losses last year, woof. A lot of them.
Remember what Seth Dagey said when he was hired? He's like, you got to get to 30 points to win in the Big 12. Right? And how many times did they get to 30 points last year?
Once. Season opener. And
well, that's how you go 4-8, right?
Yeah. You score 60 plus points in your season opener, and then you finish as one of the worst scoring teams in all of college football. It's absolutely insane.
Their offense was broken and they could never fix it.
Yeah.
So, hopefully it'll be a different story this year.
Any you broke it?
Kind of. I mean, that is what happened, right? What do you make of all the defensive back acquisitions? This is another position. Now, look, some really good guys coming back, right? Yep. I mean, maybe some of those wins that you were referencing in the offseason. I think big win getting Genesis Smith to come back out of the portal. Big win to get Traden Stukes to come back. Big win to get Dalton Johnson to come back. But they needed corners, and they tried to address that position. I don't, again, it's a lot of we'll see, but there's at least some familiarity with a couple guys.
Yeah, 2 of them played at San Jose State. One of them is Michael Dansby, who played the last couple of years there, was pretty productive with the Spartans. And then his longtime teammate, a guy that he went to San Jose State with, Javion Cole. They're both from McClymonds High School in Oakland, which is the same high school that running backs coach Alonzo Carter coached at. So there's definitely a lot of ties there and familiarity. And both of those guys went to San Jose State. They were great. Javion Cole decided to go to Texas, and then things didn't pan out at Texas. And I think we've talked about this, Lev, where, just because he ain't Texas good doesn't mean he's not Arizona good. Bill Norton wasn't Georgia good to get on the field, but at Arizona, he was one of their top defensive linemen. So I think Javion Cole, look out for him to compete for, potentially a starting cornerback spot. And, having Marquise Gross-Killebrew back, big time. I expect him to be one of those starting corners, but who's going to replace Takario Davis? That's going to be, a spot that many guys are going to fight for. And heck, there's no promise that MGK is going to start for Arizona next year, but getting those cornerbacks allows you to have depth, and you can really be versatile with your defense and not just be kind of tailored to a certain style of defense, because there are so many injuries that are piled up. You can't really throw out multiple looks. That was one thing that made the 2023 defense so great, was they were able to really switch things up when they needed to. The defense in 2024 didn't have that luxury. So I think adding a bunch of defensive backs, adding some size on that defensive line. I also like the additions they made at linebacker with Blake Gotcher, who had 162 tackles at Northwestern State. I like Max Harris as well. So the pieces that they add on defense, I think are going to really, I'm going to say turn things around completely, but I think the depth, is going to have Arizona's defense in much better shape than we saw in 2024. But cornerback, that was a position they really emphasized. I think it's 7 cornerbacks they signed in 2025 between portal and also the high school recruiting level and also junior college level too. So yeah, they're going to have no shortage of defensive backs just in case guys go down.
Yeah, they list everyone as a DB, so it's kind of somewhat hard to distinguish who's going to do what, especially the high school guys. You never know. Sometimes they do switch between corner and safety, and we'll be able to get a better read on that to a degree, at least in spring football. The fact that they have all these portal guys up the number of mid-year enrollees to 33 out of the 53. So there will be a lot of these new faces are here, and they'll be on the field in the spring. I'll be curious to see what the defense looks like. A little bit under-publicized move relative to some of the others, but Danny Gonzalez being promoted to defensive coordinator and Dwayne Aquina now coaching the defensive backs. Like, what is the system going to be? How are they going to play more zone? Are they going to play more man? Are they going to pressure a lot? I think Danny was known for pressuring. I think when he was the coordinator at San Diego State and ASU, like, he comes from the Rocky Long coaching tree. They played a 3-3-5 type of scheme. What does that really mean? Like, is that third linebacker a space linebacker, or is it more of a Chase Kennedy type who maybe has the body of a linebacker but is rushing the passer most of the time? I think the defensive line coaching is going to be different than it was, for sure. There was a lot of undisciplined play along the defensive line last year, and the goal was get up field, like, period. They had a lot of poor edge containment. They got a lot of pressures, but they also gave up a lot of runs to the perimeter. So I think that's going to look totally different too. So like I head into spring ball, which again, it's still another 6 weeks away, Justin, but I'm just very curious to see what the product looks like, because there's just so much change. Whereas last year, as you mentioned, like, there were a lot of changes, of course, whole new coaching staff, but it was kind of like, should we keep things the same? Should we, maybe we don't want to change too much because guys are used to playing a certain way, or maybe they won't like it and they'll end up leaving. I don't think they have those concerns going into this year. I just feel like they're all kind of on the same page of the playbook.
Like Lev said, spring ball starting on March 18th. Mark your calendars. All right, Lev, before we get out of here, Super Bowl is this week. We got the Kansas City Chiefs and the Philadelphia Eagles going up against each other. Our guy, Christian Roland Wallace, former Arizona Wildcat, is playing like a reserve nickelback spot for the Kansas City Chiefs. He's looking to win his first Super Bowl. How about that? Rookie season, gets to go to a Super Bowl. I think that's cool for C-Row. Lots of Wildcats have played in the Super Bowl. As a matter of fact, Christian Roland Wallace becomes the 32nd Wildcat to play in the Super Bowl. But I think probably the most memorable Wildcats to play in the big game, first and foremost, has to be Nick Foles, right? Philly special, beating the New England Patriots. Great play. I think he's got a statue outside Lincoln Financial Field because of that Super Bowl win. Is the only U of A player in program history to get a Super Bowl MVP. Nick Foles, very beloved in Philadelphia, also Tucson, Arizona. And then Rob Gronkowski, he's got a few Super Bowls from his time with the New England Patriots and also the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. And Teddy Bruschi also, I think he's got 3 Super Bowls all with the Patriots. So lots of Wildcats have played in the Super Bowl. Unfortunately, many have fallen short. John Fina, offensive lineman, was on the Buffalo Bills teams that lost 4 straight Super Bowls. So it's cool to see another Wildcat in the Super Bowl. Lev, who do you got in the big game?
Well, first of all, you mentioned the Buffalo Bills. So much heartbreak for that fan base. My goodness, they've come so close so often. They had those 4 Super Bowls, and now they're in this Patrick Mahomes era where the Bills have a franchise, Hall of Fame bound quarterback in Josh Allen, and they can't beat Mahomes. It's just got to be so frustrating for them. I felt like the best 4 teams in the NFL this year were Kansas City, Philadelphia, Baltimore, and Buffalo. Buffalo eliminated Baltimore, and then Kansas City eliminated Buffalo. So
cannibalism.
So two of the 4 are still here. I am going with the Eagles. That's kind of what I would like to happen, just as a fan of the sport. Because I am one who gets I feel the fatigue sometimes when it's kind of the same team winning over and over again. We always look at things through the perspective of narratives, and something new is usually more interesting than kind of the same old. I know there's like a little bit of a backlash against the Chiefs because there's a perception that they get a lot of calls. There's the data doesn't really back that up, but I also think that Patrick Mahomes has kind of embraced that role a little bit, and he flops sometimes, or he does some things like slow down near the sideline to try to draw some contact and then goes flying out of bounds that annoy people. So I'd like to see the Eagles win. I think it'd be a good story.
I would love to see Philadelphia win. And Jed Fish's roommate in college, Howie Roseman,
Yeah.
getting a Super Bowl.
Hey, I got one more thing for you, Justin.
Yeah, what's up?
We should talk about this to let the people know. There has been a change with how our Wildcast app works, right?
Oh, the Wildcaster, yeah.
Yeah, the Wildcaster app. So it used to be that everything on there was free. Okay, we have updated and upgraded the app. It now works similarly to how it would if you went to our website, where you get 2 stories a month for free if you're not a subscriber. Okay, but here is the cool part about this. You can subscribe exclusively to the Wildcaster app for $4.99 a month and get all of our sports content. You do not have to have a subscription to the Daily Star to do that. Maybe you don't want to have a subscription to the Daily Star because of whatever reason. You don't like the Daily Star's political stance, or you don't care about news coverage or whatever. You just want the sports. You can get this app for $4.99 a month. And it is not just Arizona. It's high schools. It's junior college. It's anything that we write about the local sports scene is available on this app for that very reasonable price, in my opinion.
Very reasonable.
If you are a subscriber to the Daily Star, have a digital sub, all you need to do is sign in and you will get all that stuff for free as well. So that's another way to do it. But we now have the sports only option, the a la carte option, if you will, that I think a lot of people have been pining for. And a lot of people hopefully will sign up for that. And please, let us know what the experience is like.
Yeah.
Signing up, using the app, etc. Give us your feedback. We're still in a bit of a trial and error phase with that, but I wanted to let everybody know about that change, which I think is important, and I think it's a positive step especially for sports fans.
Yeah.
Right. Because I know there are people out there who are like, they don't like the Daily Star for whatever reason, but they love the Arizona Wildcats and they want to read about them. Well, here is a chance to do that if you want to go that route for $4.99 a month.
Think about it as the Wildcaster Plus, where you're getting all exclusive content. Like, I'm telling you, we have a lot of talented individuals on our staff, and they put out a lot of great work. Like Lev, all your columns, the news and views, like these are things that you can't get anywhere else. So trust me, if you want to stay informed with all things Arizona Wildcats, Southern Arizona sports, we have our community sports editor, Elvia Verdugo. She's got a lot of great local coverage. We have our student athlete of the weeks that come out every single week. I recently wrote one on a point guard from Palo Verde High School who leads the state in assists. And he also plays quarterback for the Titans too. These are the stories that you can't find anywhere else. So if you like Tucson/Southern Arizona sports, Big 12 sports, because we got our guy Wilner riding the Wilner hotline as well. Like, we give you some national perspective, but man, the local stuff that we have, it's second to none. So please, like Lev said, go to the Wildcaster and subscribe. Sports only. And you know what, Lev, growing up reading the Arizona Daily Star, with all due respect to the other sections, I went straight to the sports.
I always did it. I always did it as well. I'm going to call this the stick to sports option.
Yeah.
People, right. If you want to stick to sports, get yourself a sub to the Wildcaster app. Very cool. Absolutely. It's very well organized too. You can pick the sections that you want to follow. All my columns are in one place.
Yeah.
Which I think is really cool. Personally, it's super easy to find if you want to go back and read something. And we pump out a lot of content. It is a steady stream of coverage, so you can't beat it.
Absolutely, man. Also, just was reminded by not only have we seen 32 former Arizona Wildcats playing the Super Bowl, but the Pride of Arizona marching band, they performed in the first ever Super Bowl halftime show. They collaborated with Grambling State, and the band, the Arizona Wildcats marching band, performed at the Super Bowl I halftime show. We've seen Beyonce. We're going to see Kendrick Lamar coming up this weekend. We've seen Prince. I think, had the Rolling Stones done a Super Bowl halftime show?
I want to say yes, but I cannot recall. There have been so many.
So many.
I saw Prince in person at a Super Bowl. They used to, I don't know if they still do this, but they used to have press conferences for the musical acts. And he comes out, he didn't say a word. He just started playing with his band. So we got like a free show like before the Super Bowl with Prince.
That's amazing.
Yeah, I know.
Then in poetic fashion, sings Purple Rain as it's raining, right? This is at MetLife?
No, it was I think it was down in Miami.
Oh, it was in Miami. Okay.
Right. I think it was the Bears and Colts.
Yes.
I could be getting this all wrong because it's all kind of a blur in my head, but I think that's what it was.
Okay.
Yeah. I actually
remember the rain.
Yeah, I actually watched that Super Bowl from the media room because we had like auxiliary seating and it was raining and I'm like, I'm not sitting out here. So that was the only time I've ever watched a Super Bowl on site from a media room on TV. That was a weird week.
I think the media room at this year's Super Bowl in New Orleans is in a parking garage.
I saw that.
Did you see that?
It shows you what they think of us.
Second class citizens, us media guys are. All right, that'll do it for this episode of the Wildcast podcast. Please subscribe, rate, and comment the Wildcast on Apple and Spotify. And like Lev said, Wildcaster app, it's upgraded, has a lot of cool updates and all the bells and whistles. If you're a Arizona Wildcats diehard, you got to download it. Getting the app is free, but getting the content, like everything, you got to pay for that subscription, but only $4.99 a month. Just sacrifice a cup of coffee at Starbucks. And
can you even get a cup of coffee at Starbucks for $4.99?
Oh, maybe like the average one, like a basic cup of coffee. Yeah. So yeah.
So less than a cup of coffee.
Less than a cup of coffee, man.
Per month, you can get all of our sports content.
We appreciate you guys for listening as always. And also thank you guys for watching us on Tucson.com.